Hi, the film I will be talking about today is Raging Bull. This film was directed by Martin Scorsese and stars Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Cathy Moriarty. This is the third film I've done with De Niro and Scorsese, but I just couldn't wait any longer. I had to talk about this film. This film is about a boxer, a real boxer, Jake LaMotta. But this is not a boxing film. This is a film about the human condition. This is a film about insecurity, jealousy, misogyny, masochism. Someone who can take himself to the brink in the ring, but is so emotionally ill equipped to deal with day to day life. That's the one thing he can't do. He can't just function in this world. He has to be at conflict with something. He's a pugilist in constant search of a fight. Everything that comforts him at the same time ends up destroying him. And watching this, seeing an actor like De Niro get a part like this with a director like Scorsese, his first time ever working with Joe Pesci, and then Cathy Moriarty coming in playing the part of Vicky LaMotta, all together, it was truly a home run. This film has an interesting origin story. This came at a time when Martin Scorsese's drug addiction was at an all-time high. Robert De Niro went to visit him in the hospital with the book that Jake LaMotta had written about his life, tossed it to Scorsese in the hospital and said, "I think we need to do this." And this was the beginning of Scorsese rebuilding himself, pulling himself out of this slump that he was in. It was such a low point in his personal life. This became a passion project. Joe Pesci, up until this point, had never been in an A-list film. He had done one B movie called Death Collector that they found. He was working at a restaurant at the time. He had been a barber. He had worked for a mason. He earlier had even tried to be a singer. He had a nightclub act with a friend of his where they would play music and tell jokes. And he was about at his wit's end. He was done. He shows up at the restaurant and they said, Robert De Niro called for you. Yeah, I bet he did. Well, then he sees the area code and sees that it's a California area code and realizes the guys at work wouldn't know a California area code. They get in contact, they meet, and they tell him, what they plan on doing, and this is sort of like his deliverance. This is something you dream for. And when you see Joe Pesci in this film, Joe Pesci is so small in stature, and yet when he walks into a room, his attitude is 5 feet in front of him. He is absolutely one of my favorite actors of all time. I remember first seeing him as a young child in a film like Home Alone that we all loved as kids, and he's just one of the burglars that Macaulay Culkin's, putting through hell. And then seeing him in Goodfellas, Casino, then seeing him in this film, My Cousin Vinny. And the through line is, anytime he's on camera, you can't take your eyes off of Joe Pesci. And then the pairing of he and De Niro together was magic. They seem to have this immediate shorthand on camera, which is mind-boggling when you see this film, realizing this is the first time they've ever worked together. And in the scenes that they have, it's almost like they don't really talk to each other as much as they bark at each other. Everything is heightened. The people in this film, they live at the edge of their nerves and the top of their lungs. This is that kind of film. This is a film about a man who can't tolerate happiness, whose jealousy and insecurity beats him down on a daily basis, and he is in constant search of a fight as a way to exorcise these demons. And it pulls us in as an audience, and it takes us to the mat with him. This film doesn't just pack a punch, it packs several punches. And after you see it, You're almost exhausted yourself, like you've just gone 12 rounds with somebody. This film starts off with Jake LaMotta in a nightclub. He's sectioned off by himself, and he's kind of reciting this monologue to himself, like doing the routine. And then it immediately cuts to him in the ring. And this film is shot so beautifully in black and white. If you've ever seen a beautiful black and white photograph, think of that photograph and think of seeing it come to life. And there's so many slow motion shots in this film that just to watch it on camera is a treat in and of itself. And we see LaMotta in the ring, and he knocks this guy down, but they don't give him the fight, and we realize it's because he's not connected to the right people. And Joe Pesci, who plays Joey in the film, immediately says, "You don't leave the ring, you don't leave the ring." And kind of sets the tone for what we're in store for. People are throwing things. You see somebody get thrown into the audience, and you know then you're in for a wild ride. We then see Jake LaMotta at his house and the way that he interacts with his wife at the time. He doesn't talk to her, he screams at her. And you can see he lives in a world where he wouldn't even see it that way. This is normal for him. He talks to her truly like a dog. Like he doesn't see her as human. She's subhuman to him. And then his brother shows up, and they're talking back and forth. And his brother, you can tell both of them see women in general as second-class citizens. They were raised in an environment where women were simply there to serve. They were not on par. They were not equal. And it's in this scene with Joe Pesci where he says, he kind of looks at him and says, my hands, they're small. And Joe Pesci holds his up. So are mine. He says, I want you to hit me. I want to see what you got. This is something he wants to do. He said, are you crazy? No, I'm not doing it. And he pushes him and kind of backhand. No, hit me. Harder. Rolls up his hand and hits him. And it's at this point that we see that Jake, there's something wrong in the circuitry. Something's off here. This is a guy who craves violence, conflict, doesn't know what to do with himself when he's not fighting against something or someone. He's never at ease. Pain is a companion for him. And as Joe Pesci's doing this and he's hitting him saying, come on, he's throwing these homophobic slurs at him, saying he's inadequate, he doesn't hit like a man. The camera does pan, and we see the wife kind of staring out of the bedroom, watching them, thinking, what am I involved with? What have I married into? And later on in the film, Jake comes into contact, or sees, not necessarily comes into contact, he's with his brother. And they pull up and they see this beautiful girl, played by Cathy Moriarty, who's Vicky LaMotta in the film, by the pool. And she looks like she just stepped out of a calendar. Like, she's that beautiful. And he's inquiring through his brother about her. How old is she? They say she's 15. Now, Cathy Moriarty was 19, and this is her first film. I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact when I've watched it, and I've watched it so many times, that this is somebody who's 19. When you hear her voice, when you see the maturity she exudes, when they said 15 in the film, which is what she's supposed to be when we first see her, I thought, well, they should have gotten somebody a little bit younger looking that could play. And then I find out they really did have a teenager. But she oozes this sophistication. And you think this is her first film, and she's going toe-to-toe with Robert De Niro. And seems more than up to the task of it. If anything, Vicky seems in the film, to have a certain intelligence and emotional toughness and maturity that Jake himself is lacking. And we realize early on that Jake knows this. He knows this is a woman that he can't treat the way he treats his wife back home. Can't talk to her that way, at least yet. He's dumbfounded by her. This is a movie star. This is somebody that, in his mind, doesn't even belong in his world. But he can't help but go for her. And he kind of treats her, he's on his best behavior in the beginning. And he's still kind of curious of, has she dated this guy? Asking his brother, did you ever do? Very concerned about her past already, even though they're not in a relationship. Eventually, it doesn't really explain about the dissolving of his first marriage. We just see that now Cathy Moriarty has come into the picture and she's his girl. And then, rather than her bring peace of mind to him, she's become a hindrance to him. Because Jake suffers from what Sigmund Freud called the Madonna whore complex. That when women are virginal and you don't have them, you're obsessed with them. And then once he has them, she's going to cheat on me. She's dirty now. Any woman, he doesn't want to waste his time with a woman that won't be with him. But he can't respect or trust a woman once she has. And we see early that this is going to be his downfall. And the film starts in about 1943, and there's this great montage they do where it's kind of shown certain fight clips with what appear to be home movies. And the home movies are in color, and then it'll cut back to black and white, and we see marriages, and we see kids being born, and the way that when people film, they held the old things up with the hot lights that would be on the kids and the people waving at the camera. And I remember seeing home movies that my grandparents had taken, and it really does capture that very accurately. And then it picks back up. At this point, Jake's married. He has children. His brother, Joey, does as well, and they're sitting in the kitchen. And Pesci's always looked out for him. And he's explaining to him about this fight coming up, and he's like, I'm overweight. And it's this great monologue where he explains to him, nobody wants to fight you. You destroy this kid, it builds you up some clout. They got to give you a shot for the title. You lose to him, all those fighters that have been running from you will now fight you. You destroy them, you get a shot at the title. You win. Even if you lose, you win. So there's no way to not win. And you see that LaMotta can't process this. And during this dialogue, Cathy Moriarty walks over and she said, yeah, he's right about that fighter. He's good looking. When she says good looking, everything stops. And he goes, what do you mean he's good looking? Nothing, he's a good fighter. He's popping. No, you said good looking. What? The world has to come to an end. She thinks that another man is good looking. And basically she has to leave the room, takes the kid into it, and he kind of is looking at his brother like, where did she come off? Well, Joey's wife says, look, she didn't mean any. And this scene is so crucial in the film because De Niro doesn't say, you see Joe Pesci look at his wife and look at De Niro and almost sort of like, don't worry, I got this. And he says to her, who in the hell asked you anyway? And she said, I was just saying. He said, you don't just say. Especially when it's my brother and his wife. Now take the kid and get out of here. And he sends her off. And you see that that's a code they have among themselves. And that's the world in which they live. Like, don't worry, I'll get her under control. I'll teach her to not speak out like that again. I'm sorry about that. I guess I got to get a little strict and rough with her next time. That's how these men operate. They, in no way, shape, or form, see their wives as equals. And Joe Pesci then says, why don't you take her out and treat her a little good? He said, the way you're treating her right now, you're going to make it easy for her to run around on you. And he said, we'll go to the Copa. We'll do something kind of fun. And he said, yeah, okay. And then they go in there. And he said, but by the way, don't tell my wife we're going out tonight because I'm taking a girlfriend. So then even the brother that can give somewhat logical advice, when it comes to his wife, he's no better than Jake in a lot of ways. He's just not as violent. And as the film goes on, eventually Joey sees Jake's wife out with some men at a club. And he goes and kind of pulls her to the side and said, what are you thinking? You're making my brother look like an idiot. And she said, listen, I'm not doing anything with anybody. I'm out and I'm having a drink. I'm tired of being treated like an old maid. And he said, no, you're leaving, and you're leaving with me, and we're going now. And she said, no, I'm not. Vicky LaMotta is not the type to be intimidated by men, and that's what drives them crazy, and that's almost what brings them in. This is new. They want to break her spirit, and they also know that they can't. And he said, no, you're leaving and you're coming with me. And she says no. She goes back to the table. Joe Pesci goes to the table, and he's saying something to one of the guys, and they're like, yo, Joe, we're just out having a few drinks. There's nothing. And the guy saying this is Sal. He's played by Faye Vincent, and he and Joe Pesci actually had a nightclub act when they were younger, and he recommended him for this film. And he's kind of like, okay, fine. And then he grabs a glass and knocks it and hits the guy in the head with it, cuts him, and she gets up from the table, and it involves this big fight. And then basically they have to go to this gangster who's played by Nicholas Colasanto, who was coach on Cheers. And if you don't know who Nicholas Colasanto is, do yourself a favor and look into him. Very underappreciated actor. And he says, listen, I'm going to let this go. And you two, no grudges. And he's a mobster, and then he tells Joey, you tell your brother he's going to have to take a dive if he ever expects to get a title fight. And that scene is one of the harder scenes to watch in the film, because boxing is the one part of Jake's life that is pure. And seeing that world get tainted like that, seeing someone capable phone it in, is so hard to watch as a viewer. And he won't go down. They expected him to, but he wouldn't. That's where he drew the line. He said, I go down for nobody. And after the fight, we see him in the locker room with the trainer crying, burying his head into the guy. This was the one unpolluted part of his life. And look at what he's done now. Eventually, Jake gets his title shot, wins, very happy. But again, Jake can't tolerate happiness. And it cuts to a scene where they're at the house watching TV. And we've already seen him hit her earlier in the film. The night before a title shot, she kissed the mobster who's in his 60s, and he doesn't care. And he's like, when did this come up, this kissing on him? And he ends up slapping her. Well, cut to, he's got the belt, and he and his brother are sitting there. She's come back in from shopping. She bends down, she kisses him. And he said, when all this kissing on the mouth? He said, it's my sister-in-law. Come on, man, relax. And he kind of, okay. And then he said, when you got in that fight with Sal, what was that really all about? He said, nothing. He said, no, really, And we see Jake starting to feel like there's more to that story, that it wasn't just an argument between he and his brother. And he said, was she with him? No, you're losing it, is what he tells you. You're going nuts. This lady's got your head so screwed up. Drop it. He looks at him again. He said, you were with it. He was with her, wasn't he? No, he said, if I find out, I'm going to kill somebody. And at this point, Pesci's done. And he said, you know what? Kill everybody. Start with me. He kind of, why'd you say start with you? And he goes, what, you're going to kill people? Go ahead, start with me. But why would you say that? And he's getting exhausted, and he said, have you been with my wife? And he doesn't put it that nice, by the way, but how can you ask me that? Me, your brother. Where do you get the nerve to ask me that? And he said, you're talking a lot, but you're not answering me. Have you been with my wife? And he said, I'm not going. And they're getting it's a masterclass in acting, that scene. And I found out later, De Niro said to him off camera when they were doing their reaction shots, have you ever screwed your mother? And that is why Pesci's face is so disgusted. De Niro knew what he needed as an actor to show that disgust, that repulsion, that I'm done with you. So he leaves. LaMotta goes upstairs and confronts Vicky. She says, and she's disgusted. What were you doing there that night? She says something. He backhands her across. She gets away from him, goes in the bathroom, closes the door. He kicks the door down. Have you been with my brother? Finally, she just says, yeah, I was with him, and we did this. She's done. She never has been, but she's disgusted with him, and he's going to hit her anyway. He turns around, starts walking down the street. She goes after him. He knocks her to the ground, goes into his brother's house, and starts beating him up. And he's destroyed everything now. The one person that loved him and was loyal to him, he's now hit him. He gets back to the house. Vicky's packing her stuff. He goes to her. He stops her. And she pulls away, and then finally she relents. Then we see Jake come to the end of his demise as a boxer with Sugar Ray Robinson when he loses his title. Sugar Ray and he had some of the most epic fights in all of boxing. And Sugar Ray Robinson was considered pound for pound by many, including that guy right up there, Burt Sugar, to be the best boxer ever. And while Sugar Ray was good in their bouts, Sugar Ray never put LaMotta down. LaMotta did knock him through the ropes. Toward the end of the fight, Sugar Ray's winning, and he just kind of drops his hands and he kind of cuffs him behind the rope. Come on. And when you're watching, you think, is he trying to bait him? Is he going to do a bait and switch and then he's going to get him? And Sugar Ray kind of pauses. You can see him kind of contemplating it. And then he unleashes with a fury of punches. And the blood is going everywhere. And finally, at the very end, the bell rings. And he kind of comes out. And he makes his way over to Sugar Ray. And he says, I never went down. That's the victory he was still clinging to. He wanted to take everything Sugar Ray had in that moment. Bring me your best, and I'm still going to stand and take it. Because again, pain is his companion. And it then cuts to him living in Miami, Florida. He's got a nightclub. He's kind of just making money off of his name. He's gained an enormous amount of weight. He's got a belly that hangs out over his pants. He's just, he's a has-been. He's a full-blown has-been at this point. He's got a couple kids with his wife. He just works the club, and it is what it is, and it happens to a lot of fighters. One night at the club, this guy approaches him, says, I need you to look at this girl. I don't know. And he said, give me a kiss. And he said, that girl kisses like she's 19. And at that time, that's about the age you would have had to be in the club. And he kisses her friend, and they go on about the night. And the next morning, he's woken up by these detectives. So we need to talk to you. Did you introduce this girl? And they show him the picture, and it's that same girl without the makeup on. And then they show him the other one with it. She was in your club last night. You introduced her to some guys, didn't you? And he's hungover, and he realizes now what's happened. And he kind of rises up, and he's in this wife-beater shirt, and he's sitting there, and his body, which was once chiseled, he's now got the gut out there. He's a shell of what he used to be. And basically he gets up, and he finds out that if he can raise $10,000, they'll just make the thing go away. And during this, he finds out Vicky is leaving him. And she shows up in the car one night and said, I'm out. And he's like, let's talk. No, you'll just put your hands on me. He ends up going to the house, and he talks his way in. Like, look, I'm just here. I'm going to leave. He grabs his heavyweight belt, takes a hammer to it to take out the jewels, goes to a pawn shop to try to sell it to raise the money. That's what his life is at this point. He's having to sell off everything that used to mean anything. And he said, if you'd have given me the belt, maybe, but you're just giving me the jewels. I can't do it. $2,000, that's it. I'm sorry. Well, that's not what he wanted to hear. And he's on the phone with somebody saying, I can't make it. I don't know. They're just going to have to do what they have to do. And then it cuts to them taking him into that jail cell. And he is kicking, screaming, fighting. And they both got him by the arm. Finally, they get him into this confined space and they shove him in. And it's these cement walls. And De Niro does some of the best acting I've ever seen. He just clenches his fist and he goes bam, back and forth, headbutting the wall. And you start to hear him scream and say over and over, why? And he's crying as he's screaming it. He is completely and totally broken. This is where his insecurities, his vices, his shortcomings have finally landed him, alone in a jail cell with nothing. And you hear him say, I've seen the movie quite a few times, but I hear him say it. It's hard to make it out, but I know I heard it. I'm not an animal. And then we see him again. It cuts to 1958. He's in New York. And he's like emceeing at a strip club, doing material. So we know that the issue in Florida is now behind him. Comes out of the club, and who does he see coming out of a store but his brother? They haven't spoken since he struck him. He confronts it. He walks. And his brother kind of turns, just keeps moving. He's reaching out. Give me a hug. Give me a kiss. Give me a hug. Give me a kiss. And he's just kind of embracing him. He won't let him leave. And Pesci's kind of moving to this side, moving to that side. Come on, you got to let me go. You got to let me go. And he eventually says, look, I'll call you. We'll work this out. But we know that was the one relationship he had in his life that meant anything. And as an audience, we see that he has somewhat brought that back. And then it cuts to 1964. He's in New York City. And it's him in the dressing room again, doing the monologue from On the Waterfront in front of the mirror. About, I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody. And then he stands up, the cigar. He's wearing the tux. He buttons it. And he starts doing the kind of shadow boxing, saying, I'm the boss, I'm the boss, I'm the boss, I'm the boss. And then he's out the door. And then up on the screen comes a quote from the Bible. And then the last line of the quote from the Bible. I once was blind, now I can see. Redemption's always there for everybody. Even someone like Jake LaMotta, who did everything in his power to drive away everything that was good. Everything that brought him comfort. But at the end, he's still there. He's still got to fight. And that's really all you can ask. He's still standing. And when that film ends, you know you've just witnessed something special. And while many said it was the film of the 1980s, I don't think anybody would argue that. AFI did it as the number 4 is the greatest American film ever. And again, it didn't win the Oscar in 1980. But what it did that a lot of films didn't, it landed right in there. And that's so much more than an Oscar or an award or critical acclaim at the time. When you see this film, it will get inside you and it stays there. So, if you're up to go 12 rounds, I highly recommend you watch Raging Bull. Until next time, thanks.